Welcome to the She Would Know podcast,
where curiosity meets expertise. Welcome back to the She Would Know podcast. I'm Shayna.
And I'm Chelsea.
And it is fall in Arizona.
Ooh, which is very different from fall anywhere else.
It is fall in the sense that the calendar said the first day of fall was yesterday, but the weather says it's summer.
Yeah, it takes until like maybe 11 a.m. to get to 100 degrees instead of...
by 9.
Yeah.
But I'll take it. We actually just spent the weekend up in Heber on a little girly weekend, which was super fun.
Which are like the mountains of Arizona.
Yeah, mountains of Arizona. And it was almost cool enough to wear a sweater.
Yeah. And it rained a little bit.
It did.
It was nice.
It was really nice.
I felt a little cold for a few minutes, and I liked that.
Fall always reminds me of when being single, and it was cuffing season.
Yeah, you got to tell me what that is. I don't know.
So cuffing season, it was like, during the summer, you go on lots of dates and just, have fun. But in the fall, you try to lock someone down, like handcuff. It's cuffing season.
When you first said cuffing season, I thought you meant like cuffing up your sweater sleeves or something.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. My mind goes to handcuffs.
Well, I cuffed Spencer in September is when we started dating. Yeah.
I guess technically our first date with my husband was in July, but we didn't actually start exclusively dating till the fall. So maybe that was it. We both weren't ready to get locked down until the fall.
How long did you and your husband date?
That's a complicated story.
I don't know how I don't know that.
We can get into it, but long story short, I did not call him my boyfriend until we were getting engaged, but that was me and my commitment issue.
Yeah.
Anyways, cuffing season always reminds me of the fall, and we're both very married, so I guess we don't really have to worry about that, but it was always so romantic in the fall to have a boyfriend and have someone to cuddle with.
I do think the fall is romantic.
It is very romantic.
Yeah.
Which is, since we have been married for so long, things can get a little dull in the bedroom sometimes. And I'm really excited to talk to our guest today because she's going to help us, spice things up just a little bit and get that conversation going again.
Yes, and she really knows her stuff.
She really does know her stuff. But first, do you have any she should knows?
Oh, I should have thought about that more before you asked me. Let's see here.
Well, I have a she should know, and I used this recently. I was really excited about this because I do not cook. I hate meal planning because it just takes too many steps. You have to find a recipe and you have to write down all the ingredients you need and then add them to cart or go shopping, whatever I need. And I get distracted in between steps, so I never actually complete a recipe. But I've discovered that Walmart has a recipe ideas section on their Walmart Plus app, and it makes meal planning and making dinner the easiest thing ever. So you can go to this recipe ideas section and it will show you a bunch of different recipes and all the ingredients you need. And all you have to do is add them to cart and get them delivered. There's no writing them down and then searching them or worrying about portion sizes. It adds the correct amount already there. And it just made it so easy.
That's genius.
It was so nice. I made dinner once and I'm going to ride that high for the next month until I feel the itch to make dinner again. But now I know how I'm going to do it.
It just blows my mind. I'm like, okay, if you don't make dinner, what do you eat?
Well,
what do you eat?
What do I eat?
I know it's easy to give toddlers just a plate of random stuff and they eat it.
Yeah. Well, I'll cook every once in a while. I guess cooking for my family is what I mean because Brandon and I don't like the same kinds of foods. And then the kids don't always I'll always offer something that I make, but usually they don't like it. Or the things that I make take so much effort that I want to save it for myself for leftovers, which is really selfish. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't know, if I've gone grocery shopping, I love chicken Caesar salad wraps. I like just tacos. I'll get the taco kit from Costco. Eggs. I ate a lot of eggs. Eggs and hash browns, egg sandwiches, something to do with eggs. We do the orange chicken from Trader Joe's, and I'll eat that for leftovers. I make a good risotto. That's probably like my one recipe.
Yeah.
But Brandon doesn't like it anymore. I think he liked it when we first got married just to appease me, but now he doesn't like it. And the kids are touch and go. They'll try bites of it, but I don't know. I want to be better. That is one thing that I want to improve on.
Well, I love making dinner.
Well, just make me dinner too. Just make enough for all of us.
I'll just make a double, but you're so darn picky.
I know. That makes it hard. It's a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is my she should know. Perfect for cold and flu season. Buy, those plastic tablecloths, not the kind that you just like throw away, but like the plastic kind that are like almost felt on the other side. They're like $2 or $3. When your kids are sick and throwing up, like just put those over everything. And then you just hose it off in the backyard or something. Yeah. And yeah, it's perfect if they want to like play on the ground, lay around, watch TV, just put them on that. So when they can't, they're not always, kids aren't always great at aiming into the bowl or trash can or whatever. Into your like family popcorn bowl that the kids also barf in. Anyways, that's great. I hate cleaning up barf because I always end up then barfing as well. So yeah, the plastic tablecloths are perfect for barf.
I like that. My son is actually really good at aiming.
That's awesome.
Like even in the middle of the night, like if he's sick, he will get up and the bowl has to already be there. That's like the first one. Then obviously he makes a mess. But after that, he just has the awareness that he needs to throw up, so he gets up and gets the bowl and throws up in the bowl. It's honestly
my daughter needs that because she's a barfer. Her go-to is to barf for any reason.
Oh, and that's hard.
Yeah, she's barfs all over herself.
I don't even think my daughter has thrown up yet.
Good for her. Let's keep it that way.
I mean, she did have a poop disaster yesterday, so she's not perfect, but
well, I think those are some great she should know.
Those are.
And I'm really excited for our guest.
Yes.
I think everybody, married or not, sexually active or not, is going to learn some really cool things.
So today we're going to be interviewing Ariel Finlinson. She is a women's sexuality educator and the host of the Ladies Talking Love podcast, so go check her out there. She received her master's in human development and family studies at Utah State University, where she created and piloted a married women's sexuality seminar, which is just so cool. She's a native of northern Wisconsin. She can't get enough of forests or fresh, squeaky cheese curds. Have you ever had cheese curds?
No.
No, me either. Her mission is to help women find joy and fulfillment in sex with their husband. She is currently living in Utah with her husband, Kyle, and their 4 young children. We really hope you enjoy the interview today. We learned a lot, and she had a lot of good tips to share, and she has a lot of content on her homepage, so you should go check her out.
Hey everyone, it's Chelsea here. I've been diving into a course that's been a game changer for my marriage. It's called From Pressure to Passion, and it's created by my friend Ariel Finlinson. If you ever feel like sex in your marriage is more of a chore or you struggle with guilt and shame around it, then this course is for you. Ariel helps uncover those myths and hurtful beliefs that we all carry and gives you the tools to create a fulfilling and fun sex life with your partner. And with our link, you get 20% off. So check out From Pressure to Passion by heading to the link in the show notes or ladiestalkinglove.com/she-would-know.
Okay, let's get started. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We are really grateful to have you here, and we are so excited to get some of our followers and our questions answered.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. This is my favorite topic to talk about.
Awesome. Okay, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I was probably like a lot of you guys. I was a stay-at-home mom and I had young kids, and I just found that motherhood was really draining and I didn't feel fulfilled and I didn't know what to do about it. And I wasn't feeling fulfilled in my marriage because I was so overwhelmed and drained. And I started to kind of look into beliefs that I had about sexuality and how this could be playing a part, because that was a hard part for me. And I realized that most of the things that I believed about sex and about sexuality weren't actually making it possible for my husband and I to create a deeply connecting sexual relationship. And so I did a lot of work on my own and study. And then I went back to school because once I figured things out, I was like, this is life-changing and women need this. And no one is talking about it in a way that is accessible and that is like not scary. And so I went back to school to get my degree to hopefully bring that information to all of you, because how we show up in our sex life. Of course, it's not the most important part of your relationship, but it is a part of your relationship that can heal, that can empower, that can create an energy in your relationship that you can't get any other way. And it is an amazing part of our relationship.
That's incredible. So when you went back to school, how many kids did you have and how old were they?
I had 3 kids. I had a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and I think she was 1 when I started.
Wow.
And then I had my 4th, like, a couple days after I turned in my last paper.
Oh
We were in it, man.
Yeah, that is incredible. So tell us a little bit more about what you got your degree in, and like how does someone become a sex therapist?
So I'm not a sex therapist. So there's one important thing. So I'm a sexuality educator. And so that was a big part of the decision is I was looking at people who were doing what I wanted to do. And a lot of them were therapists. But for me, I didn't want to be a therapist because I feel like so many of us, especially as women, like we're not going to go to therapy and be like, I'm struggling in my sex life. Will you help me? And I wanted to be the bridge. Like, I think there's so much important education and information that you can get to shift this in your own life. And then you might realize like, oh, I actually do need therapy for this part or this part. But a lot of us, I think, can do a lot of that work with education that's actually accurate and helpful, and then realize if we need more. So I wanted to be the in-between. And so I went back and I did a master's in human development and family study, and the university was Utah State University, but they let me really like create a degree focused around what I wanted. So for my final project, I created and piloted a married women's sexuality seminar and got to teach it. And so it was just fantastic. I loved it.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so then we'll make sure to call you a sex educator.
Yeah, not a therapist.
So as a sex educator, what does your business model look like? How do you go about educating people?
It's been a learning process. So I started out with an Instagram, and then I have a podcast. And then I just launched my first course just this past February. So I'm actually about to have it go live again in a couple weeks, the end of September. And it's called From Pressure to Passion. And so it's mainly online. I would love doing in-person events. I haven't gotten to do as many of those yet, but I'm hoping to keep growing like with online, because especially as a mom of young kids, I know how hard it is to do things. So I wanted to make it easy, accessible. You can go at your own pace, but also be accessible to like do questions that come in and do like a weekly Q&A as people go through the course and support them, but also have freedom to be like, I missed it this week. And it's like, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can still go back and watch it. So,
and I've been going through your course and it is awesome. We'll have to tell everyone about it at the end.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad it's been good.
Awesome. Well, we put up a question box and got some really good questions, and we have some of our own questions to throw into the mix.
Perfect.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. Okay, first question is, on average, why are women's sex drives so much lower than men's?
So this is a really common and a really good question, and I might blow your mind a little bit with my answer. But women's sex drives, I would say, aren't usually much lower than men in the way you're thinking about it. And so we could talk about a whole episode just on this question, but I'll try to make it a little bit concise so you can understand. But the thing is that we often view sexual desire, and I don't really even like the word drive because we use it a lot, and even some educators and things use it, but it makes it seem like it's something that's uncontrollable. And I don't like that. And so I like to call it sexual desire, because we all have desires. Desire is something that you're longing for. But we have grown up believing that spontaneous types of desire are what's normal. And so a lot of women maybe felt spontaneous desire before getting married, before getting into a serious relationship. And then suddenly they're in a relationship and they're not feeling desire like they used to. Or maybe they never felt desire like that, but all the movies show like, if you have desire, it just falls on you like pixie dust, and suddenly you're in the mood for sex. But that is not the case, especially for women. Most women have something that's called responsive desire or context-specific desire. And so this is just as valid as spontaneous desire that seems to just fall on you. But it just takes a little more than for someone with spontaneous desire, like their partner might get out of the shower, or they might be like, wow, I saw my partner with the kids and that was so sweet. I'd love to connect with them sexually. For someone with responsive desire, it's going to take more than a teeny bit of arousal. They're going to need a little bit more to get there. And so a lot of women are waiting to feel desire, wondering what happened, when the reality is they actually just need to learn where their desire threshold is and what it takes to get there. And that can be things like emotional connection, physical arousal. So actually like getting into kissing and hugging and touching. The mental part, being able to be like, okay, I actually am incapable of turning off my mind until I get this one thing done on my to-do list. Or I need some time alone in the shower. I've been touched out by the kids. I need some time alone to regroup. And so it's finding and experimenting what is going to get your arousal up to reach that desired threshold. And I think something that is so powerful in recognizing this is that you don't have to wait to feel sexual desire to choose to move into a sexual experience. You can choose to move into a sexual experience because you love your spouse or your partner, because you want to connect on a deeper level, because you're feeling disconnected. And I'm not talking about in an unhealthy way. I don't think sex is a Band-Aid, but like I'm feeling disconnected. Let's connect emotionally and physically to kind of regroup and get back together. And you don't have to wait to feel desire to move into that experience. But back to some of the questions, a lot of women struggle to feel desire because they're stressed and they're overwhelmed and they're giving and giving and giving and giving to their kids and their spouse and their families, and they're not taking time to be healthy in themselves. And that is a great way to not feel desire. And the last thing I want to say on this is also a lot of women aren't having sex that's worth having. And so there's no way you're going to want more if you're not having good sex. And so you've got to figure out how to make sex good for you and your partner. It's not just about them to actually be in a place where you can be like, I'm not in the mood to have sex right now, but I know I love it and I know it's good. So I'm willing to get there.
What suggestions do you have for husbands? Because I can just imagine a husband hearing this and be like, oh, responsive. That means I need to go and grab her butt, or I need to go do this. But what? That doesn't always work, especially in those moments where you are stressed and touched out. So what suggestions do you have for husbands to help get their wives into a spot where they are ready to be responsive and be interested in sex?
I think a huge part, I hear this from so many women, I think all of us have, right? Is it's like you are scared to lean into a hug or a kiss from your spouse because you're nervous it's going to lead to sex. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily like, we want sex to be good for women. That's why I do what I do. But in saying this, I think it'd be really helpful for partners to recognize that sometimes women are nervous to have any type of physical touch because they think that means sex. And physical touch is really important for men and for women. And so being over communicative as a partner, be like, hey, I would love to connect with you sexually, but if you're not up for that, will you let me know? And instead, how could I connect with you? I would love to kiss you or hold you or just snuggle for a bit. Would you be open to that? And so I think a lot of it is being really respectful and asking questions, because we have this idea in our society, and in a lot of us just internalize this idea, right? Like we don't feel comfortable talking about sex. It ruins the mood. It makes it unromantic. And that kind of feeds into everything. Then we never talk about it. We just like, if we don't want it, we just shy away, or like, oh, I'll just go walk away, or like ignore that they touched me, instead of being like, hey, I'm open to moving into the mood tonight. Let's see if we can get me there. Hey, I'm not open to it, but can we just kiss instead? So I think being really over communicative. And then also the second part of that is talking with your spouse and figuring out what helps her, if we're talking man versus woman, because most men, 75% of men have a spontaneous desire. Now, it can be switched. So even though I say it different, it can totally be switched. And there are women who would feel like they have higher desire than their partner, and you are completely normal. But to recognize, like, let's talk about what helps you get there. And I want to help you get there because I know what helps you get there when you're open to it. Does that make sense?
Do you have like, not scripts, but like phrases or any ways that you would recommend to help people communicate their desires and their boundaries in those situations? Because sometimes it's hard to verbalize like what I'm interested in or not.
I feel like I need a checklist, and I could like, these things are yes, these things are no, and like hand it over.
I have a couple freebies actually on my website that can really help just like get the conversation started. I'm not usually one to give specific scripts because I want it to be authentic, but I want you to be able, like, I have questions laid out that you can ask. And I think just getting those conversations going and starting to practice, you're going to get better at doing it. And I would say I think the number one thing is going into these conversations without blame and without like coming at it as like, you do this or you do this, and coming at it as like, hey, I heard this podcast, or hey, I've been thinking about our sex life and I want it to be a great part of our relationship. Would you be open to talking about it and what could help both of us feel more connected in sex? But I have a couple freebies. I can give you guys the links, but there's one that goes all through creating a deeply connecting sex life. And then I have like top 10 questions to ask your spouse about sex. And I think those can just be great stepping stones. And honestly, it really is just recognizing that, first of all, talking about sex is going to probably feel awkward at first because we're not practiced in it. And we probably didn't have good examples of how to talk about sex in a comfortable way. And so I've given you some ideas and ways, especially the create a deeply connecting sex life. I go really into like talking with your spouse about, what do you want sex to mean? Like, what is the meaning of sex in our relationship and what do we want that to look like? And that's huge, especially when we talk about desire. If for women, a lot of women, they feel this pressure that like you have to keep your husband sexually fulfilled and sex is more for him. That's a horrible meaning to have a great sex life. And so if you as a couple are able to talk about it and create a meaning around what you want sex to be like in your relationship, that can shift everything. So that one's just, I can give you the links, but it's ladiestalkinglove.com/connect, and you can find my other freebies in there. But that's a great place to start, just practicing these conversations.
I love that. I love that. And this question is kind of connected and maybe can, I don't know, kind of pull things together. So like, what are some ways to maintain connection and intimacy in the midst of like the busy life phases, the going to school and having jobs and kids having needs and, all the things?
It is all the things. I think the first thing is to create time for you. And that might seem backwards, but if you don't have a self, and a lot of us as women, especially if you're a caregiver or a parent, you give so much. And society has taught you that being a good wife, being a good mom, being a good caregiver is constantly giving and never receiving and loving it. Like, that is a lie. Like, you will eventually blow up inside. And so if you're not taking time for you to like be a human and take care of your needs, but more than that, finding a space that fills you up and gives you some spark in life, you can't create intimate relationships without being authentic. And so the first thing, and I know that can sound scary, I have a whole freebie on this too, because these are all topics I'm so passionate about. And I was like, I want to help women, because that was me. I was so lost in motherhood, so lost in what all the shoulds of what I thought I should be, that I felt completely empty and like a shell. So even when my husband and I had time together, we couldn't connect deeply because I didn't have really anything to bring to the table because I was so empty inside myself. So that's the first thing I would say. The next is to lean into the micro moments. Several months ago, I had read some research about men's desire, which is another fascinating topic we could talk about for hours. But it's a lot different than we expect. And the book is called Not Always in the Mood, which just the title gives you an idea, right, of how much we misunderstand men's sexual desire. But one thing that it talks about is a lot of times as women, we place our partner's sexual desire on how we look. And so as a mom of young kids, I'm a hot mess a lot of the time. Maybe I haven't showered. I just feel yucky. And so for a long time, when my husband would reach out to give me a hug during the day, I just kind of brush it off because I'm just going throughout my busy day and I felt gross. And I was like, there's no way he could want to actually be with me because I feel gross. And this shift in perspective, reading this research, helped me recognize I was missing my husband's bids for connection. And so now when he reaches out or when I reach out, I really try to stop and take a minute, even if it's just 10 breaths, right? And just hug him or just touch him as I go past, but like leaning into those micro moments to keep little bits of connection throughout the day when it's really busy, I found to be really helpful. And then my last piece of advice for this question is to find what works in your stage of life. Sex is an ongoing process. And I think a lot of us think that it's a one and done and we find what works and that's it. But that would be kind of boring. I'm actually glad it's not because it's a lifelong relationship we get to have with our partner or our spouse and we get to work on it. And so different things are going to work at different stages. And so find what works. That can be creating time, right? A lot of us think it's so unsexy to schedule sex, but that can actually be really helpful, especially for the partner with responsive desire. But create space and time. I've heard of people, you like have a sex date once a week and you plan one person's in charge of it and you trade off who plans it, how you want it to go. Be okay to be creative and take moments as they come. If the kids are off to school and you have a minute, take it. It's like a lunch break. Turn on a show at 5 p.m. and like take some time to just be present with your spouse and prioritize that because I've definitely found shifting and recognizing, going back to the meaning of sex, like as my husband and I created a definition that is empowering for both of us, this is a part of our relationship that empowers us and gives us more energy and helps us thrive instead of a drain, which I think a lot of women often feel it's another to-do on their to-do list and something that is like, I'm already touched out and now I have to help my spouse get off or whatever, which is so unhealthy. And I don't believe in that view at all. But that's what a lot of us grew up believing. And so instead, finding and making sex be something that empowers you and being flexible to find what works. It's a constant conversation. It's never going to end. I don't want it to. Keep it coming and keep finding what works in this stage of your life because it's meant to grow throughout your lifetime.
Okay, that leads perfectly into this next question. So it's, I like the way sex works now. Does it change after having a baby? And how can I help myself through this transition?
Such a good question. And I'm so glad that you love the way sex works now. Whoever asked that question, the first thing that I would say is, as we talked about redefining sex, I think that's one of the most hurtful things that affects us, particularly as women when it comes to sex, is how we define sex. And if you were to be asked, which hopefully no one's really asking you this, but like, did you have sex last night? Would you think that you had sex if intercourse hadn't occurred? And I think most of us would probably say no. But sex is not intercourse. That definition alone can be so hurtful, especially for women, because most women don't find the most satisfying part of sex to be intercourse. Intercourse can be a great part for both people, but that's not sex. Sex is what is going to be fulfilling and great for both partners. And of course, within what both partners are comfortable doing. I want to make sure and add that, but like it has to be good for both partners. And so as you're preparing, looking at this change after having a baby, I think a huge thing, because I know for me, when I had my first baby, it was like, okay, we can't have sex because to me, sex was intercourse until my 6-week checkup. And this is a really long time for my husband to wait. And I was like, this is long. So right after, I need to get back into it. Instead of recognizing that sex isn't intercourse and the goal of sex is connection. And so even after you have a baby, you and your partner get to decide, how you want to engage sexually, and it doesn't have to include intercourse as you're healing. There are so many other ways to engage sexually and connect on a deeper level without intercourse. And so some questions you could ask is like we talked about, like, what is the meaning of sex in our relationship? What does sex include? Talk about how you may want to stay sexually connected. And then, of course, it can change depending on your birth. Some women have really big vaginal tears. Depending on the degree of that, stitches, it can be hard to get back into intercourse. And so don't rush it. Take your time. And this is one myth that is also really hurtful, besides the definition, is this idea that it's normal for intercourse to be painful for women. And I mean, I think most of us heard that going into a sexual experience, like it's going to hurt the first time. And that sets us up for the worst expectations. We either expect pain or we're grateful there wasn't pain instead of going in and being like, this should be good for me. And so intercourse should never, ever be painful. And so if you feel ready to attempt intercourse, that's great. But if it's painful, stop and wait. And pelvic floor physical therapists are fantastic if you need some help. If you're having painful intercourse after having a baby, pelvic floor physical therapists are awesome. And if you have a healthcare provider, you can ask and they are willing to help you. That's awesome. If they dismiss your painful intercourse, it's time to get a new healthcare provider. That's what I have to say about that. But yeah, it might change, but just remember that communication and remember it's not intercourse. And so you can find different ways to connect. And there might be some discovery, like you might realize what I liked before birth, I maybe like something else, but that's okay. And it's part of the journey. So be okay to explore and learn and change and just grow with your body and with your relationship.
I love that. Thanks. I think that'll be really helpful for whoever answered or asked that question. Okay, next question we have here is another one that's pretty specific, but I think a lot of women can relate to. So I'm breastfeeding and my nipples are really sensitive, not in a good way. And I'm sad because nipple stimulation used to be a big part of sex for me. Now I just don't enjoy it as much. Tips or advice?
It is. There's a lot of changes, like we were talking about with birth, breastfeeding, and something no one ever talked about, right? Like suddenly, if you're breastfeeding when you're having sex, you're like a sprinkler system going off. Like, it's like, oh, this is fun. Okay. And so things can change, and that's okay. What I would say is to explore other types of touch that you like. For women, the most sensitive part, I wish I had my model down here for I didn't bring it because I didn't think to. But the clitoris is the most sensitive part for women, and that is the equivalent of the penis for men. It's not the vagina. The vagina actually doesn't have many nerve endings inside it, and that's why most women aren't able to orgasm from intercourse alone, because the clitoris is what is the hanky-panky, as Emily Nagoski says. It's the most important thing. And so I would explore other type of touch. So the clitoris, of course, most important, like pleasure, but also we are full of what they call the erogenous zones, what can feel good. And I'll just list some of them, but these are all places that you can explore touch. Your skin, that is your biggest erogenous zone. And there's so many nerve endings and potential for pleasure. Your earlobes, mouth, lips, your breasts. So you could even explore other parts of your breasts if you like that without doing your nipples. Your genitalia, buttocks, inner thighs, your anus, backs of knees, fingers, toes, neck. Like it is all over. So just exploring other things that you enjoy and finding those types of touch. And then when you're done breastfeeding and your nipples have healed, like that'll probably be a great part to bring back in. But there are so many other pleasurable ways to be touched as well.
Thanks.
How can women, like, because you say things like that and it's like, oh yeah, I can just figure it out. But sometimes it can feel awkward to do it with a partner. I mean, even by yourself, it's awkward. But how can women make sex better for themselves and explore their sexuality to kind of discover that?
Such a good question. I think something that can help with this is talking with our partners and helping them understand where we're coming from. So something that has helped me and I think can be really helpful is to share with your partner what you're learning right here, that women actually experience orgasm and what brings like them to orgasm in a different way than men. And this is the one piece of super helpful advice you can tell your husband is men usually do not have to learn how to orgasm. but most women actually have to learn. And that can feel really frustrating, but I think that can be helpful for your partner to realize, because for most men, it didn't take much and they knew, and it just happened, and they don't realize that women's sexual experience is very different and takes different things. And here's another thing that can be helpful. Like, most men can go from 0 to orgasm in 5 minutes or less. Most women take at least 20 minutes of clitoral stimulation before they can reach orgasm. And so this differential is really big. And if we aren't communicating with our partner, they are going to think that our sexuality is similar to theirs because no one's taught them and no one taught us. And we're going to be sexually unsatisfied forever because we're not expressing and sharing. And so there's a couple different things I talk about in my course that can help you start to cover it. I'll cover a little bit right now, but I would recommend talking about what you're comfortable with. Some people are really uncomfortable exploring by themselves. I personally do not believe in masturbation, but I feel like exploration is very different than masturbation in that you are finding what feels good to you by yourself in order to bring it into your partnered experience, not just to pleasure yourself. And so that's an option to talk about. Another option, and this can feel really hard, and it's hard. It's going to feel uncomfortable because we're not used to focusing on our own pleasure or focusing on ourselves. But together with your spouse, either you self-touching as you explore what feels good with a vibrator with your hand, or guiding his hand. But that can be tricky. I'm going to say that can be tricky because your spouse, your partner, does not know what feels good to you. Even though we've been taught men are more sexual and they'll just know that's a lie. And we're the only ones who know. And so being able to really communicate what feels good, and the resource I would recommend is a book called Slow Sex. I don't love everything that's taught in the book, but I love they're called orgasmic meditations, which is a really funny word. But basically, it sets up exactly what you do, and it has the woman lay down and tells you exactly how the partner touches her vulva. And it only gives you 15 minutes. So it tells you exactly what you can do to explore, to shift like different pressure positions. And then after 15 minutes, you're done. It does not lead to orgasm necessarily, definitely should not lead to anything intercourse, or for him, it's strictly you both learning to focus on her body and what feels good to her. And it can be really helpful because it's really scary. It's really vulnerable at first. I've done it. And it was really hard at first. Like, just being there, it's all about you, focused on you. But it's a really important shift for you to be able to start focusing your mind onto what you're feeling in your body, help your partner learn about your body. Because like most vulvas probably have one side that's more sensitive, but like you wouldn't know that unless you explore and learn together. And that can be a great way to be like, okay, we're doing exactly what's in this book. It's going to tell us how to do it so we can explore. And you kind of debrief after to talk about like what was good. And then you can keep trying it. And so I think that can be a helpful thing too, if you need more like structure. This is exactly what we're doing.
It sounds awesome. What was the name of that book again?
Called Slow Sex.
Okay.
I can send you the link.
Yeah, that'd be
Her
great.
last name's like Diadone or something. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
Yeah, I think that's really important because, I mean, a lot of women don't even know what it looks like down there.
No.
Like, grab a mirror.
No.
Have them explore your body. Because, again, you said it takes like 5 minutes on average for men to orgasm. Right. Like, you want sex, like men, you want sex to be a little bit more enjoyable, take a little bit longer of time. Focus on your wife first because we know you'll get there in the end, but...
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
And like I said, like they recommend in the book to call the vulva the pussy. Like I do not agree with that, but I can recommend the exercise.
Yeah.
I love that. And you kind of mentioned this earlier, and I think it goes well into this next question, but sex toys. Tell us your thoughts, feelings about sex toys, any recommendations that you have.
How to introduce them into a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it can feel hard. I totally understand that, right? Like it can feel like you're coming up to your partner and being like, I want to replace you. But this is what I want you to realize is like, that's not the thing. A human being cannot be replaced by a toy. So like if we're thinking about especially like the purpose of sex is connection and to bring us together, like you cannot be replaced by a toy. And there was one researcher and educator, I love her name is Dr. Batsheva Marcus, but she talks a lot about this, that actually she's found it's more the women who feel that than the men. Like often the men are actually more open than you would expect. And I wouldn't say this is a blanket statement, but maybe it's more you're nervous than they are. And so bring it up, ask them. But I would come up to these types of conversations, kind of how I mentioned before, like, hey, I'm realizing that I have a lot more sexual potential than I maybe realized. And I want our sex life to be really good for both of us. Would you be comfortable talking about some things? I was learning about vibrators, and I've heard that it can be really good. Because here's the thing with vibrators. Almost all women can orgasm with a vibrator. And because, like I said before, orgasm is learned, a vibrator can be a great way to help you learn how to orgasm. Because once you learn, it can be easier to know what you need to get there. And then you can maybe try without. But if you've been trying without for a really long time and you've never orgasmed, like it is just so hard. And sex is not going to be fulfilling if you're constantly not orgasming, because the goal is not orgasm. The goal is connection, but it should be pleasurable. And so focusing on that pleasure. Something that another educator, Kristen Hodson, said that can be helpful to think about too is she's like, if you were to eat cookies, no one would ever be like, but did you use a mixer or do it by hand? Like, I can't eat them if you use the mixer, right? Like, yeah. It's not so much about the process. And so recognizing that it's a tool. This is a tool. The clitoris needs steady and consistent stimulation. And without that, is almost impossible to reach orgasm. And a vibrator is a really great way. Lips, tongues, hands, fingers, they get tired. A vibrator can run out of battery. Just make sure it's charged. But like, that is a great way to get you the stimulation that you need. And I would recommend you could try like a bullet vibrator. They're smaller ones. A clitoral sucking one can be really great. They have internal, external. So I actually have the links that Dr. Batsheva Marcus shared with me of her top vibrators. I'll send those over and I'll add maybe like one or two that I have, because you can start with a cheaper one. They can be really expensive, but don't be afraid to start with a cheaper one, explore, know it's a learning curve, and recognize that it's going to be a process to integrate it, but you can make sex with a vibrator be a great thing for both of you, because it's going to help you probably orgasm better and help you learn if you haven't. And if you have a good, loving spouse, they are going to want you to enjoy sex. And if that's what's going to help you enjoy it more, I think that's a great tool.
Amen.
Great. Great. I'm excited to see those recommendations.
Yeah. So we have a few more questions. What are some common misconceptions about sex and sexuality?
I think one of the biggest, like I mentioned, is that women orgasm from intercourse.
Yeah, seriously. Who taught that?
Right? Probably men, not to be
the patriarchy.
Yes.
It's always the patriarchy.
And I think another misconception is about desire, right? Like, if you actually love the person and you have desire, you're going to move at the same pace and you're both going to want sex at the same time and move in that direction, instead of recognizing that's not real life. That's the movies. Mm-hmm. And we get to explore and move into the mood. And one of us is usually going to be slower than the other. And so we need to go at the pace of what I like to call the slowest hiker, right? We need to stay with them and make sure that we're going at a pace that we're for them.
Which is so interesting, because like it's so normal for literally everything in life for some people to be slower or better or worse or whatever. Yeah. Like thinking about like cooking, like I'm much quicker at following a recipe and cooking than my husband is. Oh, we could make the same thing. Like it takes me 20 minutes to make cookies and it makes him like an hour to make cookies. But I don't know why it's so hard for us all to transfer that to sex.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a big reason is we're so uncomfortable communicating about it. Mm-hmm. And so there's no way the person who's moves faster is going to recognize you're not there, because a lot of women then feel pressure to fake it because they want their spouse to be, this is fascinating research. Sorry if I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent.
Go for it.
But a lot of women, so actually looking at research of sexual satisfaction, the numbers are misleading because it looks like men and women are pretty similarly satisfied. But a researcher, she went in and she was like, I think her name's McClellan, but she went in and she's like, I want to see how they define sexual satisfaction. And what she found was women defined their sexual satisfaction based on if they thought their partner was sexually satisfied more than if they were. And the man usually was like, if I orgasmed, if it was good, I'm going to say it was good. And so there's this huge difference that as women, we've been taught to look outward, whether it's like inherent in us. I think there could be some of that. It's also socialized in us. And that happens a lot in sex. Instead of being able to look inward and be like, what feels good to me? I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to let my partner know, I don't like that, or let's try this. We're going to focus on them and make it good for them. But because we take longer and we need more help usually, I believe that it should actually be shifted, that sex is a space for women to practice focusing on themselves and allowing their partner to focus on them. That's a space for you to be served, for you to be loved. And of course, we care about it being good for your partner, but that's a huge shift, because if you're only thinking about your partner, you're not going to be sexually fulfilled.
Oh,
I really like
that. You got
that.
to re-say all that 10 times for us all. Like, that was so perfect.
Just that mindset shift. Because if you think about it, it's like, again, yeah, for most people, your man is going to get there, but you're not.
Yeah.
So if you take the time to focus on you and be like, hey, this is for me, he'll be fine. That might make it more enjoyable for both parties.
Yes. And I would say one of the, like, this isn't a myth. There was another question you sent. Sorry, I'm jumping into it. About like sexual concerns. For some men, like premature ejaculation is a big thing, that it's like, well, once they go, it can be really hard for you as the woman to stay in your head and be like, I can still enjoy sex even though he already orgasmed, and it can still be about me. And premature ejaculation can make that even harder. I think you should practice still making it pleasurable for you after he goes, or make it so he doesn't go until you do, because some people do just fall asleep after they orgasm. That's like a literal scientific thing. But for premature ejaculation, I can also give you the links for a couple articles on edging, but that can help your partner, if that's a thing, to practice lasting longer, so that it's not like, oh, he went and he fell asleep and now you're stuck here. Like, So
are there any common sexual dysfunctions for women?
I would say painful intercourse.
Okay.
It's common. It's not normal. It's never supposed to be painful. But a pelvic floor physical therapist that I love, she talked about in one of her articles that 1 in 5 women throughout their life will experience some type of pelvic pain. And a lot of women push through it and think it's normal, but it's not. But like, there is nothing, a lot of women listening maybe are like, well, I can't orgasm, but there is actually like scientifically, medically, nothing that differentiates women who can from women who can't orgasm. So like almost every single woman has the potential. They just need to learn and figure out how.
And maybe not rushing into intercourse, like get yourself warmed up first. Like that might actually help with the pain part.
And even taking intercourse off the table, like going back to desire, right? Like so many of us are pushing to intercourse because that's our definition. That's what we've been taught. We don't even know how to feel desire. Take intercourse off the table. Take like maybe even keep your clothes on, right? And explore desire again. Explore what it feels like to just kiss and to just feel each other without thinking it's going to lead to sex. And you can bring up and remember or learn what desire feels like. And that can be a really helpful exercise as well to remember or learn what desire feels like.
I love that. Okay, and what's the range of like, for men, I guess for women it's kind of to be determined per person, sounds like. But for men, what's the range of like, if it's taking them too long to orgasm, you know, is it like 20 minutes, 5 minutes? Like, what is there a number to that?
I have never read a number, and honestly, I wouldn't say there needs to be a number, because it can be completely normal during a sexual encounter for a man to like go from erection to flaccid, as they call it, like where there isn't an erect penis multiple times. And that's okay. Like, I think a lot of us have this idea that like, if my spouse has an erection, I need to relieve that. And let's just take that off right now. Like, it's fine for an erection to happen and for nothing, for that cycle not to be ended. It'll be fine. And so I haven't read a number, but it is completely normal for things to last longer and for your partner to learn to focus on you. There's an article where these couples talk about, I can't remember the word they use in the article, but basically like very fulfilling sex. And a lot of these couples talk about focusing on pleasure and focusing on deep connection and authenticity and longer experiences. And I can't remember if it was the same article, but a lot of satisfied couples mentioned like an hour plus for sexual encounters. And so not being afraid to take that time, not being afraid to be like, I have to have my husband have an ejaculation. Like, he doesn't need one right at the beginning. He can wait. Like, focus on you, allow him to focus on you. And if you're in a healthy, good relationship, your partner is going to want sex to be good for you. If they don't, that's some big red flags. And it's going to take some learning processes to recognize and learn together how to make it good for both of you. But in a healthy relationship, you're going to want to do that for each other.
Do you have any other red flags for people who might not be in a healthy sexual relationship?
Definitely coercion, being like saying they need it, right? Or like, well, if I can't get it from you, I'm going to go have an affair, right? Yeah. Like, or withholding love. And women can do this too sometimes. That's really unhealthy to be like, I'll only have sex with you if you mow the grass, or, setting these lines of you have to do this and making it an exchange. Like, sex is not meant, in my view, in the way, like, religiously, I believe God intended it. Like, sex is meant to connect us. It's not an interchange of you give me this, I give you that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So do you have any advice? So maybe someone's listening to this and they're like, this sounds awesome and I want to do all this and experience all this, but I haven't had sex in months or something like that. Like, tips for getting back into it when it's been a while.
I think recognizing that it probably will feel a little bit awkward and uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's if you haven't had sex in a while, and when I say sex, I'm not meaning intercourse, just all of it, right? Like being intimate. And I think recognizing that and being able to embrace it is the first step. And then being able to talk about it and say like, hey, we haven't had sex in a while. I want this to be a good part of my relationship. I'm feeling nervous because we haven't had sex in a while. Can we plan a time so that we have a good amount of time to go slow and ease back into being intimate because I'm nervous about it? So I would say plan a time. Make sure that if you have kids, like, make sure you have a good lock, make sure there's a time that you won't be interrupted, and be okay to practice. I think a huge thing with getting back into sex, but also even if you are having sex, to remember it doesn't have to be perfect every time. And it won't be, especially if you have kids. Like, that baby knows.
They're
gonna cry.
Maybe turn down the baby monitor.
Right? Yeah, just turn it off. They'll be fine. Yep. But just know it's a journey and you get to keep practicing. And it's never a one and done, like, this is how it is. It's something that grows and changes throughout your life. And so if it's been a while and you want to, I just talk about it. I think I believe that a relationship can't thrive to its full potential if sex isn't part of that marriage or partnership. And you can maybe have a fairly good relationship, but it can't reach the depth without sex. And so if you want a deeper relationship, you already have a good relationship, lean into that discomfort and just ask and be like, hey, I'd love to try to have sex more often. Would you be up for that?
And I'm sure they'll say yes.
Yes. I think all of us want it. Yeah. I think that's a great place to wrap things up. You shared so much amazing knowledge and wisdom, and tell everyone a little bit more about your course, because like I said, I've been going through it and I think it is amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad. No, I basically took my own experience and what I needed to learn to get to a good place sexually, and then added in the research that I got to study to create a course specifically for women. And I think there definitely need to be courses out there for men. My husband does come in and we do like a video together. At some point, I want to bring him in more and have him talk to the men a little bit more. But I wanted something just for women because there are so many things that make it hard for women, like knowing that we need to learn how to orgasm and knowing what exactly to do to learn. If I had my model, I could show you some ideas. But talking about that, learning about self-silencing, that's a huge thing we do as women. Relationships are so important to us that we often silence our deep needs to preserve the relationships that we want to be strong. But in doing that, we actually make it impossible to create the deep relationships that we want. And so we talk about that. We talk about body image because that's a huge one. We've been taught our whole lives that only beautiful bodies can make, your partner be sexually attracted to you. And so learning to find peace with your body where you're at right now and recognize that sex is so much more than just about your body and learning about your anatomy and learning to redefine sex. These are a lot of things that we cover in my course. And I just want to help women uncover the potential they have and live up to our privileges because we have so much potential to be full, equal, thriving partners. And I believe this part of our relationship, when it's missing, it can really inhibit our potential to be deeply connected as in our marriages, in our relationships.
That's awesome. Tell everyone where they can find your course and anything else about it.
Yeah, so if you just go to ladiestalkinglove.com/she would know, you'll get these awesome ladies discount code that they have with my course, and everything's laid out. It'll talk about what we cover in each of the modules, what you'll get, and what you'll be able to learn. And of course, email me anytime, message me on Instagram. You can find me at ladies.talkinglove on Instagram, and then my website, ladiestalkinglove.com. You can reach out.
Well, thank you so much. It was so great to talk to you. And hopefully we can do this again because I'm sure we will have a lot of follow-up questions.
No, I love it. Oh, and I do have a podcast too that covers a lot of this. The Ladies Talking Love podcast.
Okay, go check her out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening. We will see you next week.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Would Know. We would love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for topics and experts you would like to listen to, drop a line in the comments or connect with us on Instagram or TikTok at shewouldknow.podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on Apple or Spotify and leave a review. We would like to give a special thanks to Adam Kump for our intro and outro music. And thank you for listening. Don't forget to stay curious, and we'll see you next week for a new episode.